What's up, guys? Tim Little, Matt Allen. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin, and welcome back to another episode of our 2024 Holiday Buyer's Guide series. Today, we're talking everything strolling.
Strolling remains the hottest technique in bass fishing. Mid-strolling, bottom strolling, the Cindy rig, moping, the Jig And Minnow, right? The names go on, but the concept is the same. Now, no other segment of bass fishing is growing faster than strolling. New baits, new heads, new rods, new concepts, all the time. It's incredible how fast it's changing, so it's only fitting to have a buyer's guide dedicated to this, even though just a few weeks ago we did a dedicated strolling video.
Yeah, if you haven't got a chance to check that out, we'll leave a link down below in the video description to check that out. But yeah, I guess we'll kick it off. So we'll talk about baits and then heads, and then I guess finish up with rods and reels.
Yeah.
All right. So well, yeah, let's start with baits.
Might as well start that. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a big category.
The Depths Sonar Shad. This is really the bait that took off over here in the U.S. market. This is really what, I mean, for weeks, if not months, you couldn't find these things online. You couldn't find them.
Maybe years.
It's been a long time. I can't even open this package right now. But yeah, the Sonar Shad it's a soft bait. It's got a winged head on it, but it is insanely soft. So a ton of action. Now, when we're talking about strolling, we're talking about shaking that rod tip and getting that bait to go side to side to side to side. You know, and you're gonna fish these the same areas that you would take your throw your guppy head or your 2.8 Kitech or your little mini underspin, something like that. You don't necessarily have to be scoping or anything like that.
Absolutely not.
Just this. We're talking just fishing in those high percentage areas, but taking a little ball head, we're going to talk about heads in just a second, but putting that on a little jig head and putting that on these minnow style baits and getting them to rock side to side, it's an action these fish haven't seen, and it's an action that just catches them. It really does. But that Sonar Shad, if you can find them, these are really, really good.
I'm glad Tim started off by talking about the connection between this and forward-facing sonar. So that, the rise of strolling, or the Jig And Minnow, as a lot of pros like to call it, happened as a result of its popularity with forward-facing sonar. But they are not actually connected whatsoever. This is not new. Its explosion is new. Walleye guys have been doing this for a long time. A lot of bass anglers have been doing it for a long time. But this idea of taking a plastic and getting it to flip-flop in the water rather than a swim bait with its paddle tail, otherwise it's the exact same thing, right? But the difference here is that bass have been seeing paddle tails all day, every day for a decade now.
Right.
They have not seen this action, and it's amazing how well they respond to it. Frankly, we were shocked how well they respond to it. It really is incredible. So the number one thing you need to do is separate this from forward-facing sonar. Whether you like that stuff or not is completely irrelevant to whether or not you should get a handle on how to stroll, because this is that effective. This is up there with the A-rig, with cranking, with the Senko, those key baits that come along and just change bass fishing. This is that. It's happening right now. If you've not been a part of it yet, you need to be. And like Tim said, that Sonar Shad, that was the gold standard, right? That's the one that set the bar that everything else is judged by. The first one I'm going to talk about is from Hog Farmer. This is the 4.5 Spunk Shad. This bait, in my hand, has done an incredible amount of damage. The Sonar Shad is incredibly hard to get. They're constantly out of stock. As a result, they have been replicated, ripped off, knocked off, right? Everybody has taken a shot at them. There are baits that are almost identical. They don't necessarily work the same, but they're almost identical. I'm not a big fan of that personally. You won't see any of those baits in this video. Whereas the Spunk Shad is completely different. This is our favorite chatterbait trailer. But as it turns out, you get to shake in that rod and stand alone on a jig head. They eat it as well or better than they do on the back of a chatterbait. That 4.5 Spunk Shad is a perfect size. Now, we won't go deep down the rabbit hole of color today. We'll give you those recommendations in the video description. If you're not familiar, every buyer's guide we do, in the video description, there'll be a breakdown of everything we talk about, including favorite sizes, colors, related heads, all those things, so that you, if you're shopping for yourself, shopping for a loved one around the holidays, just trying to take advantage of the Black Friday sales, or in Tackle Warehouse's case this year, the Black November, so that you can easily take advantage of that. We put all that in the video description. But what I will say about color is that two-toned colors work the best for this, because the two colors as they're rolling shows that motion very well, and we definitely get a bit better on those two-toned colors as opposed to just a solid color.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely want those two-tone colors, and you'll see that throughout these baits that we selected today. Next up for me is going to be this guy right here. This is the Freeloader by Crush City. It's a 4.25 bait. Has ribbed body. Again, kind of has that
pintail.
Pintail, yeah, that whole pintail category, like the Spunk Shad, like the Stroll Shad. But this thing has unbelievable side-to-side action. You know, like Matt said, you couldn't get the Sakamatas for a long time, and I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on this guy just because they were available, but they do work extremely well. They are fairly soft, but like Matt said, I mean, first fish I ever caught strolling, I was fishing a main lake opening. It was a key area that I've caught a ton of fish in, and I fished through there and I couldn't catch anything, and I knew the fish were there. I tried a Senko, I tried a crank, I tried everything. Dug in my rod locker, tied one of these things on, fired out there, and no joke, first cast, shaking halfway back to the boat, don't 3-pounder. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. It's just that action that they haven't seen. You know, when you're fishing highly pressured areas like we are most of the time, these fish have seen everything. They know the tackle better than we do.
Right, right.
So when they see something that's like, that's different, they eat it. So, but that Crush City, that Freeloader has been a winner for me, and we've caught a ton of big ones out here, especially on Chickamauga.
That is such a proven bait. All right, next up, also from Hog Farmer, this is the Stroll Shad. So this bait is designed specifically for this technique, for strolling. So the Stroll Shad, in overall shape, is very similar to a Spunk Shad, right? It's a pin-tailed minnow, but that's where the similarities stop. This bait is a 4-inch bait. It is much more slender than a Spunk Shad all the way around. It's a very slender bait, smooth-sided bait, flatter sides, which really exaggerates that rolling action. And then it's got an elongated, a stretched out pintail. This thing has a ton of action. And all of these smaller baits, like 4-inch and smaller, when you're working them, it's almost like a vibration. You're not hammering those things. Just shake very, very light and very fast. Pop, 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 pop. That's how you get the roll out of that bait. The Stroll Shad has just, I mean, it has exploded for me. My confidence in this bait is sky high. It is the #1 bait that I have tied on as we've gone through fall, especially as we're headed to the cold water months where the smaller profiles really play. That one will continue to take more and more of my time. I really like that bait.
And that is key. Like, as we slow down, as we get into this colder weather, the colder water months, what Matt talked about, that bait size, that is key, right? I'm not gonna go out and throw a 5-inch Sakamata shad versus, you know, a 4-inch bait, or even this guy right here. This is a 3-inch Yamamoto scope shad. So again, we're trying to match the hatch, right? We're trying to match the size of the bait fish that's, you know, we're trying to mimic. But this guy right here is a scope shad. It's a lot like the Stroll Shad. It's kind of like, it's got a rounded belly, but kind of angled sides. It does have a real good side-to-side action, more of like a rolling action, but having that, the benefit, you get the Yamamoto colors, right? Yamamoto has
a lot of benefits.
has a lot of really, really good colors, but having that smaller profile, here it is compared to that 4.25
The freeloader.
freeloader, sorry. And it's just a bait that really, light line, highly pressured situations, that's a really good bait fish size bait that works on the strolling technique.
Yeah, so this is something that you can do on 5-pound line. It's something you can do on 15 to 18-pound line, right? You can do it on light heads, you can do it on heavy heads, everywhere in between. And we will continue to see a trend towards the lighter as the years go on, I'm sure. But right now, for myself, I've kind of put that on hold because it's such a slugfest. I mean, it's not hard to get them to bite, that I throw a lot of like 8 and 10 and 12-pound line and just lean on them because they'll eat it. It's amazing. Now, when we started, we mentioned that there's been a ton of innovation in this category. From Duo Realis, we have the Bay Riff, or the BR Fish. This bait, don't get caught up on the color, that one's just bright and easy to see. But that head, or that bait paired up to this head, the BR head, okay? The head itself has fins on it. Particularly the lighter weight heads is what we're using. The really heavy heads mute the action, but the lighter weight heads paired to this BR fish, you rig it flat side down. Okay, there's a rounded side and a flat side down, and instead of giving it that really light shake, you pop that rod tip. This thing walks the dog underwater. We're not talking about this little body roll. We're talking walking the dog like a fluke, but you can do it at depth. There is major innovation going on in this category. It's awesome.
Yeah, you want to talk about an action the fish haven't seen, especially at deeper depths. That thing's really, really cool. All right, one more finesse bait for me in this category, then we'll talk about some bigger stuff. This is the 3.5 Spunk Shad. So Matt already talked about the 4.5.
Yep.
Right, now we're just talking, again, kind of like that scope shad, we're talking about the smaller profile. You still have the spike tail or the pin tail, but you still have that, that bait fish profile. And again, with these smaller ones, just like Matt talked about, you want to hit these smaller ones a little bit lighter. You're using lighter line, typically lighter heads. You know, we'll go down that road eventually, but right now, real finessey, real tight shakes and get that thing wobbling. But that 3.5 Spunk Shad fits great in this category, but even better in that smaller bait fish portion of the category.
Especially as we go into winter. Last but not least here, for the tiny ones, we've got this one from Great Lakes Finesse. This is the Hover Minnow. This one's rigged. There's the package. The Hover Minnow, again, is a very different bait. It's got a cupped belly. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it has a cupped belly on it. So they make 2 heads for throwing this, and we'll link both heads in the description. One has a line tie out front like this. That's when we're casting cross distance. The other one, I do have them here. The other one, the line ties pulled back. It's halfway back. That is when you're fishing more vertically over the top of them, cold water, right? Just dropping that thing down. That helps. If that line tie is pulled back, it keeps that thing flat in the water. It keeps it horizontal, and you can just work it right there in front of those fish and just rock it. Now, the thing I like about this bait is that it has dual action. So we're strolling with it, but if you are using live, right, you're looking at scope or anything else, and you see a fish chasing and they're just not committing to it. Or in my case, most of the time I'm fishing this stuff blind, right? Mostly lead heads, just don't care. When I'm fishing this thing periodically throughout my cast, I'll just kill it, give it slack. Because of this belly shape, this thing will just start a slow spiral to bottom. It does the death spiral, something Tim has talked about a lot through the years. And then it lands perfectly on bottom every time. And a lot of fish that are tailing that thing, whether you know it or not, will either tag it on the way down, or when it lands, they come and snag that thing. So it's got this dual action that a lot of these other baits don't have. Again, innovation. There's a lot going on.
All right, last bait for me. We talked about the smaller stuff. Now we're gonna talk about some larger baits. Now this isn't necessarily a technique that's just for, you know, small baits and finesse fishing. This guy right here, this is the Miki Armor Shad, but it's the 7-inch bait. Okay, here's that 3-inch scope shad. You can see the difference. Again, you have that two-toned, Matt talked about it. It's extremely important to get that side-to-side flash. But if you're on a fishery, like we are here on Chickamauga on the Tennessee River, if you're on a fishery where these fish are eating bigger baits, try experimenting with some bigger mid-strolling baits, okay? So this guy right here, that's that 7-inch Armor Shad. Again, super soft. It has a real good roll to it. Again, you can shake it, get that side-to-side action. You can kill it, let it hit off bottom, pop it up real quick and start shaking and get that thing darting around. But these fish react to the bigger baits. So it's not necessarily just the smaller baits that work well. The big baits work well in this technique as well.
They hammer that thing. All right, now this one is one that's harder to get. This is from Raid. The fish roller it's a JDM bait, and when they're in stock, get them. I don't know if there'll be any in stock right now that like they land and the next day they're gone. It's a lot like a Sakamata. There's an insane demand for this category right now. But the fish roller is another one of those baits that I latched onto early. I did a ton of damage with this bait last winter, right in the heart of winter. It's got a flat top and bottom and flat sides, and it's just got a really consistent action in cold water. I was very impressed with it. I didn't have to hit it very hard. I could just work it a little bit slower for those sluggish winter fish, and it comes in some really, really good colors. That is one that I think a lot of people overlook, mostly because it's not always available, but we'll link it in the description just like all the others. If it is available, that's one that's worth scooping up right away. Oh, I do have one more bait.
Okay.
All right, one more for you. From Z-Man, this is the Graph Shads. Hopefully that shows up for you. This is a very different bait. As the name would suggest, it's designed specifically for this, right? They designed it for guys using forward-facing sonar to be able to see it really well. It shows up really bright on forward facing, but that is not where it's shined the most for me. What I love about this bait, it's very different in this category. It's an Elastec body, so super stretchy, super durable, but the jig head is built in. So you go through the head with your line and you actually tie to the belly. As a result, this thing sits perfectly upright in the water, perfectly balanced, totally horizontal all the time. So if you stop this over the top of a fish on like 2D sonar over underneath the boat, it'll just sit perfectly over the top of them. The most damage I've done with this bait is barely touching it. I've caught them in the summertime, but I've crushed them in the cold of winter on this thing. And you just barely just bump, 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 like night and day different than a lot of, the fast shaking mid-column stuff. I throw this, let it go to bottom, get it up off the bottom just a little, and then just bump, bump, and it's got a perfect rock, but it always comes back to totally neutral, hovering in the water column. And those lethargic cold water fish just respond to it.
All right, let's jump over to heads, because this is another big category in this category. We try to simplify it for you. Typically, day in and day out, I'm using one of these two guys. This is the guppy head, whether it's the guppy head 1/0 hook, that guy right there, or the 3/0. Again, it's a two-tone head, so when you get that side-to-side action, it flashes those different colors, really shows that side-to-side action really well to those fish. But you guys have thrown a guppy head for years on your favorite finesse swim baits. It works really, really well on strolling as well.
And they're both lead.
They're both lead.
So a lot of the stuff that you see online is like everybody throwing these tungsten heads and all this. If you're staring at a graph, yes, I guess. But if you're not staring at that stuff, it doesn't matter. The guppy head is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll round out these ones.
Yeah, go for it.
And then two other heads, again, they're lead heads, but they're specifically designed for this technique. First off, you got the Horizon LG. What's special about this hook is it fits, the gap on it's a lot bigger. It fits better in some of the larger profile baits, so you don't have to worry about, your hook being too small for the actual bait, okay? And then this guy right here, That's the Owner Range Roller. What's cool about this hook, I don't want to pull out the package, but the lead goes all the way up to the face of the line tie. So it's giving that bait natural instability. It's making it unstable, right? So it's raising that center of gravity so it wants to go side to side. So you can get that really good side to side action without having to do a ton of action with your rod tip. But those are two great lead heads for this technique.
Then I've got two more for you. These are tungsten heads, and tungsten really comes into play if you're staring at that screen, right? And you really want to be dialed in way out there and get a stronger return, but there's advantages to tungsten regardless. So two here. This one is from Queen Tackle, and this particular head, you'll notice the line tie is on the wrong side of the head. That is designed so that anytime you stop moving, it's going to fall over, one way or the other. You guys probably got hit with some of the same Facebook ads I've been hit with. You see these baits like twisting all the way over. That's done with that head. So if you want a really exaggerated action, that one will do it. And then this one from Dirty Jigs Tackle, this is the Guppy Head HD. So heavy duty tungsten, a tungsten guppy. More important to me than the fact that it's tungsten is that it has a heavier duty hook than a standard guppy. And I couldn't care less whether you're looking at a screen or not. That hook is amazing. I'm so excited about this thing. The keeper system on it is different from the original guppy. This is actually the keeper system that you would find on our underspins. It is a superior keeper, holds baits incredibly well, awesome hook, tungsten head, the end.
I'm stoked about that.
Yeah.
I mean, not just in strolling, but just in your finesse swim bait game.
Fishing.
What do we got? We got
rods.
Rods. All right, so guys, getting into this technique, you can you can take your favorite Nico rig rod, shaky head rod, whatever spinning rod. Now this is, for the most part, as of now, it is a spinning rod technique. It's really hard with a bait caster to do that, the wrist shake with a bait caster. So this is a spinning rod technique. Shaking that rod tip, you know, reeling slowly as you bring that bait closer to you. But you can get away with your favorite shaky head rod, your favorite, even maybe your favorite drop shot rod, depending on the weight of the heads. But as far as putting together a budget combo for you that you can get started in this technique, this is a Fenwick Eagle. This is a 7'1" medium extra fast. So you want that tip extra fast. And having that extra fast tip, what that helps with is getting that thing going, right? You want that real tight wiggle, that's, you know, side to side action. So having that extra fast tip is you really need it. And then just paired up with this is actually Shimano Sidonia. It's a 2500 reel, 10-pound fluorocarbon, primarily 8-pound, depending on the size of heads. But it doesn't have to be a technique or a combo that for this technique to break the bank. You can get away with a rod that you already have. But we'll link you know, this combo down below in the video description. But if you want to try this technique out, we highly recommend it, because I was slow to the boat. Like, I didn't understand, like, why would I throw this over? It's not
until they start eating it that you're like, oh, that's why.
Yeah, it wasn't until they were not eating my 2.8 Kitech, but they're eating, you know, this. So it just, I can't explain it besides the action. But like Matt said, you don't have to have electronics. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can fish it where you'd fish your 2.8 Kitech. Yep. And you can do it on a rod you probably already have.
And you can absolutely do it from shore just like you can do it from a boat. Now, if you want to jump down the rabbit hole with this technique, because once you start getting bit, you realize this is a serious thing. That's where a lot of rod innovation has been coming lately. Solid tip rods in particular really help with this technique if you want to put the money into it. Day in and day out, Shimano X-Pride, the 610 medium heavy solid tip, which is a 610 MH extra fast. That solid tip allows you to have an extra fast or even an extra fast tip without it becoming brittle. So these tips will allow tons of action to that bait without you snapping tips off because they're so extra fast. paired up to a sustain, I mean, you are talking about such a high-end combo, it's not even funny at an affordable price. It's a mid-priced combo with insanely high-end sensitivity. A phenomenal combo. But if you're going to go down this rabbit hole, I waited to try the solid tips because I was pretty happy with the rods I was using. And then when I actually tried it, I mean, there was no question. There's a difference there.
Yeah, if anything, make sure you're putting a reel on there that has a good drag system on there, because I can't tell you how many giants we've caught on a little guppy head on light line. You know, you're sitting there shaking and then you know, you don't want to burn up your drag. So make sure you get a reel with a good drag.
All right, and then last but not least, you know, jumping all the way down the rabbit hole. That was the 610 medium heavy solid tip in the X Pride, and they also make the medium in that. But this is taking it a step further. This is that 610 medium plus solid tip. This is in the Poison Adrena line. Paired it up to a Stella. It's all the things, right? It's ridiculously over the top, but you've got to realize that this went from like a sideline thing that was sort of interesting to a staple on the deck of my boat. And once you make that jump and you realize that this is a major deal and you need several different baits tied on pretty much at all times, all of a sudden I'm able to justify the spend on a high-end combo because this thing is in my hand all day long, not every day. Like we were on a spinnerbait bite last week, right? But it's in my hand a lot. And when you're working it, you're working it. You're holding that rod up. You've got a lot of motion going on, and getting a super light, super smooth combo just takes it to the next level.
Yeah, and you might think you may not need, sensitivity, right? Like there's been times where it's like, was that a fish? Was that a fish? And you reel up and they're gone. But getting into those more sensitive solid tip rods, those higher price point, and braid to leader also helps, but having that extra sensitivity to, a lot of these, that bait's sitting there shaking, those fish just come up and get it from behind. I mean, they're not coming up and slamming it. Right. I mean, sometimes they are, especially when you're throwing the bigger baits, but
they smoke that one.
I've had some hook sets I felt in my elbow, or bites that I felt in my elbow on the bigger baits, but for the most part, the little baits, they just come up and just
show up on it
and just kind of load up and swim away. So having that extra sensitivity will give you just a split second more reaction time.
All right, guys, with that, we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are going 7 days a week, no breaks, all the way to the end of the buyer's guides. We will see you again bright and early tomorrow morning to talk Ned rigs.
Guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys tomorrow.